Hey, it's Gary. And yes, it's been a long time since I've been on here. I think about 3 months, but back Gary on manufacturing with a few thoughts on the market and where things are going and what's perhaps happening. I'd like to pause to thank my sponsor, longtime sponsor of the website and the podcast and everything I do, in inductive automation and their flagship product, Ignition. Ignition from Inductive automation is your go-to source for HMI SCADA, industrial Internet of Things, and any of that kind of connectivity sort of uh, product. I've been to many other conferences and talked to customers, and customers like it. They say the platform is good and it works well, and they really appreciate things like the pricing model and support that they get and the community feeling that goes along with it. They will be announcing additions and enhancements to the platform next month. I'm recording this in mid-August of 2024, and mid-September in Folsom, California will be the Ignition Community Conference once again, and always a great time. And I'll probably be reporting on cool things that they're announcing there. Thank you to Inductive Automation and their flagship product, Ignition. I've been through a lot of market changes in my career, which started a long time ago, and it's amazing how they happen. And it's not necessarily cycles, but there's kind of a business cycle to a market. And a long time ago, I started out in recreation vehicles. That was in the 70s, and in the 70s, most of you don't remember because you probably weren't there. Uh, we had the Arab oil embargo. It was called at the time the precursor to OPEC, and there were huge lines at gas stations. It was hard to get gasoline, and the prices went up, and it was a rough time if you were in a travel kind of market. And then we got hyperinflation that went up. Inflation was huge. Interest rates were over 20%. It was crazy. We bought our second house at that time. That was good, and so on. And part of my job, I was kind of like an administrative, I don't know, gadfly or something, where I had a particular job. I worked in production inventory control and a little bit of manufacturing engineering. I got moved to the product development / engineering department, but I was always given special tasks for things like analysis and research and so on. And in the middle of the 70s, I was given the task of revaluing the inventory, the physical inventory that we had, and just to see would it be better if we switched from LIFO to FIFO to whatever we used, and so on. And so those were interesting times. Now that market has bounced back lately, but it was down for quite a while. And when I was there, we went from approximately 1,800 employees to approximately 100 employees when I left. And so that was my first experience of seeing a market boom where we were building trailers like crazy, and then bust where we were building, a couple a week. So, I moved on from there to consumer products, where I was product development manager and kind of head engineer for a company that was doing at the time kerosene heaters, because it was very expensive to heat your house. Everybody was living in a cold house in the early 80s, and kerosene heaters came from Japan, where that was kind of a normal thing. Americans didn't know how to use the darn things, and a lot of my work was warnings and sitting on different kinds of task forces and industry standards groups and that sort of thing. And then kaboom, things changed very rapidly, and that market went bust. And from there, I moved on to a company that actually wasn't the market that went bad. It was building automated assembly machinery and equipment. And actually, that was a situation where the president, these days you would say CEO of the company, uh, basically had a meeting with the bank and force us into Chapter 7 bankruptcy. So that was fun. So I've seen that kind of stuff, and we were doing well and hiring a lot of people and building some really cool machines and systems. And and interfacing, and those are in the 80s, and those are the first interfacing of personal computers with automation equipment and so on, and it was pretty cool. But it went away, and then I got into computers, PCs, and I looked at the PC market, and that was pretty new and growing in the 80s. Um, but by that time, it was really hard to have a small business. I thought about like having my own business. I thought, no, there's just nothing there anymore in that. You had to be a big box store and so on. And I got into a company building PC add-in cards. If you're old enough, you might remember how you could open up your personal computer and slip in um, uh, specialized cards, and we sold a special card for printing. And in those days, you had just a few options. And if you were, let's say, engineering or architectural, your output went to a plotter that was expensive to run and usually tied up. There's usually one in a whole department. And if you needed a really good high resolution proofing print, you could do it in a dot matrix printer with our add-in cards. And I'm sitting there looking at that, and it looked like, add-in cards were a big deal at the time. But no, once again, some market changes. I'm reading InfoWorld and saw that Intel was coming out with the 8386 chip, and I started looking at its specs, and I said, "Holy crap! That chip will be able to incorporate all this stuff, almost all the peripheral stuff, like I was selling and other people were selling." And yeah, sure enough, you could incorporate eventually, everything into the operating system, and the chips, microprocessors got so much better than the GPUs, and we just keep adding to that these days. But where's the PC business these days? Where's adding cards? You can get some if you build your own gaming PCs and so on. But once again, a market kind of up and down and through on. And then I got into control and instrumentation sort of stuff, sensors and the beginnings of device networks and programmable controllers, the beginning of PC-based control, which was another flash in the pan that went zip, zip, zip up, zip down. And that was a really fast moving market. And I used to tell the CEOs of the main competing companies in PC-based control, said, "You're kind of missing the boat here. You keep arguing whether your PC-based control is better than the other person's PC-based control, but your real competitor is PLCs, and they sell stability. You can't open them up, you can't get into the operating system, and so on. And you're trying to build something on top of Windows. And my goodness gracious, here we are all these years later, and we just had the old famous Windows blue screen of death. Thank you to a ill-timed security system update. But that was the big thing back in the late 90s and the early 2000 aughts and so on. And so then I got into publishing and with control engineering, and that was based on machine control and a little bit of process control and instrumentation, a little bit of software, but that was all the nascent stuff at the time in the industry. And then with a couple of other people helped start up Automation World. And my idea was, and their idea, the other people doing that, basically thought they would just supersede Control Engineering and Control Magazine, both of which are still around, and so is Automation World. But my thought as I looked at the market was things have moved from simply control to data. And so the controller is sucking in all kinds of instrumentation and sensor information and data, and people are going to start use that data one way or another, and that I called automation. And because it was control enhanced to another level, and pretty soon control incorporated machine motion control was a totally separate thing, and it was an arcane piece of business. And we could then start to incorporate motion and with logic, and those things became more powerful, and they became true automation engines. But what have you seen in the last 12 years in that terms? Automation, or Rockwell Automation had their control logics, and Beckhoff Automation has their platform. And there were a few others that popped up, and Siemens just keeps cranking on. But basically that market just kind of matured. What else could they do? They were using, you get these little upgrades, and the companies in that business, and that's where I'm heading with this talk right now, is the companies in this business basically have all matured. There've been a lot of consolidation. Boy, did I see a lot of consolidation um, going on, and that's what happens in a mature market. You start to consolidate things down. You start to cut employment back a lot. Not a lot of development. Any product development really is through acquisition. And I can cite like Emerson's. They publicly were thinking about pursuing Rockwell Automation. I have no idea what they were thinking, but they did buy National Instruments, which added some extra stuff. They bought the PLC business of GE and this sort of thing to enhance their portfolio. And that's basically the way they're growing. Emerson is calling themselves a software company now. Rockwell Automation started calling themselves a software company, and they kind of dropped the software, although I think I have no inside information, but it looked like they really scaled back their internal software product development and so on. And they bought Plex for MES, and they bought Fix for a CMMS for maintenance software. And both are cloud based. And that was how Rockwell got into the cloud. And that's what companies do in this kind of market. So, my own personal thing, I went through automation world, and by 2013, I saw what was happening there, and I exited Automation World and left it to Jim and Dave and the people there, and went out on my own. I'd started the blog in 2003 to cover instrumentation and control, and then automation and software. And this podcast started in 2007 as Automation Minutes, and I morphed it to Gary on Manufacturing probably 10 years ago or more, just to broaden it out a little bit. And it's got to broaden some more because my interests are broader and the market is now mature. And there's not so much going on anymore, and it's much to look at as far as some of the software and instrumentation and that sort of thing. There's no pizzazz with Profibus and Ethernet IP and those things. I mean, they work and they're going well, and hard is going well, but we've developed an awful lot of stuff. We've developed an awful lot of standards, and now it's all pretty mature. The thing of it is, can the new engineers coming up, use all this stuff and build on it and do more as far as advancing manufacturing, which leads to another whole problem, which is the stagnation especially in America. But I was just reading about Germany having some similar problems. How much new manufacturing is there? You need a couple of things. You need new products that are exciting and things either, usually for consumer products and whereas like for instance automotive gone, uh not so much there, not a lot of, they're not building huge new automated lines like they used to, and they were all kind of crazy to do that anyway, to be honest, in my opinion. But they did it, and they bought an awful lot of equipment, but they're not doing that anymore. They don't need that kind of equipment. Packaged goods and food and beverage and that sort of stuff still uses automation, but that's pretty well developed, and they pretty well know what they're doing and chucking it on. And if you're going to build a new plant, you need a new product, and I don't know where that's coming these days. So uh, that's what's going on there. And this is a slight ramble as I go through about 50 years worth of market changes. And me personally, I went from automation, and then there was the big burst of Internet of Things. I spoke at a couple of conferences. I traveled to a few places. I wrote a lot about that for a little while. I got affiliated with Dell Technologies, Dell Computer, and Hewlett Packard Enterprise, and they both entered and exited in a hurry in the manufacturing space because there wasn't a lot of sales to be had there, to be honest, not compared to what they could sell in IT. Let's face it, if I could sell high-end compute for data warehouses and AI and all that kind of stuff, why mess around with manufacturing? So I went kind of through that, and we kind of went through other phases. Lately, most of the press releases I've gotten lately over the last few years have been security. The security companies don't spend any money with media, so none of us can make a living reporting on cybersecurity. Uh, we went through a collaborative robotics phase, but that has really matured. That all got consolidated And it's good stuff. Not that it isn't good stuff. It's all good stuff, but just not so much new and exciting there. So I don't know where all this market is going. I don't know where manufacturing is going. If you're in oil and gas, you're still going pretty good right now, but the world isn't looking good in the future as we start to move more and more to electrical. And and if we can move electrical technology or electrical generation into more efficient and better ways and not so fossil fuel dependent, that will be very interesting also. So anyway, yeah, came back after some time and think about this a long time, written a couple of articles, and I'll see what's coming up and what's new and interesting and so on. My basic interests last few years have been more on personal development and how to get you know, all of us better, stronger, fitter, healthier, and that sort of thing. And also educating and bringing along our newer generations of people. And I have two grandkids in high school, and naturally, I've done an awful lot of work in soccer, which was geared toward helping young people not just become soccer referees, but to learn how to dress properly, show up on time, be responsible, make decisions, have a stiff backbone and stand up for yourself when people start complaining, and all the stuff it takes to be a referee. And whereas none of my proteges ever became professional referees, looking on LinkedIn over the last 20 years, it's refreshing to see how they all became, good engineers and business people and so on. And that's actually more exciting than having a professional referee, is just helping people grow. And that's an awful lot of my emphasis these days. So anyway, this is Gary. This is a Gary on manufacturing, a broad look at market trends and where market is going, and we'll see what's coming up next in manufacturing. I'm looking at the small software company starting up, or some other small company that might be a glimpse at the future. And if you know anything, you can ping me, Gary at the manufacturingconnection.com. Anyway, and once again, I'd like to wrap up thanking my longtime sponsor, Inductive Automation, and their flagship product Ignition. Ignition will give you a whole new view on your operations, whether they're manufacturing or something else, wherever you need to collect a lot of data and visualize it and make decisions. Ignition is there for you. Thanks to Inductive Automation at inductiveautomation.com. Thank you for listening. This is Gary. Thanks.